court cases, 3 appeals, and a Supreme Court rule that paved the road for a safer Canada. R versus Keegstra commences with James Keegstra, a public teacher working at a high school in Eckville, Alberta. His life changed dramatically in 1984 when he was charged under Section 281.2 of the Criminal Code, now known as Section 319. He broke everyone who, by communicating statements other than in private conversation, willfully promotes hatred against any identifiable group is found guilty. By teaching his students anti-Semitic views and spreading racism through the school system, he was found guilty of publicly attacking. This case shaped Canadians on dealing with hate speech laws and forming protection for minority rights from being verbally attacked, which tends to sprawl into violence. The question for Canadians became, do we value our freedom to say anything over protection of minority groups? I think the answer is clear that freedom of speech can be violated under the Charter in order to secure that no violence emerges, but this is not the case for everybody. The issue of freedom of speech against hate speech in Canada has always been a topic of discussion. But why did Canada implement these laws to begin with? It really all started back in 1965 when the Cohen Committee was created by Guy Favreau to deal with all forms of hate propaganda that surfaced Canada. He decided to take this initiative because of the rise in number of extremists that would promote racist or anti-Semitic views and endorse violence against these people. The committee came to agreement that a new legislation should have 3 prohibitions: A. Advocacy of genocide, B. Incitement to hatred of groups that is likely to occasion breach of the peace, and C. Group defamation. The government decided to adopt these newly created ideas and include it in the law, creating now Section 319 of the Criminal Code. From this point on, the law has been clear, unlike discussions among Canadians. Cases like Keegstra and Sharp have brought public attention and refilled controversial views. And in 1982, the creation of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms acted as a loaded pistol under Section 2B to protect the right of freedom of speech. Jumping back to the case R versus Keegstra, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms relates to this case because he in fact used it in his shield of defense. He claimed his right of freedom of expression under Section 2B and innocent until proven guilty, Section 11D, had both been infringed, and with that the charge should be quashed. The court, however, disagreed, and he was found guilty along with a $5,000 fine. Sure that he was innocent, Keegstra then decided to appeal it to the Court of Appeal of Alberta. And here they actually sided with Keegstra and found that both of these rights were infringed, but overturned the case where he appealed to the Supreme Court of Canada. The Supreme Court used the Oakes test and declared the infringement is justified. The negative effects on society would outweigh the individual. Therefore, he was finally sentenced to 1 year suspended sentence, 1 year probation, and 200 hours of community service. After facing a 12-year-long runoff with the court system, Keegstra finally lost the race. Or did he? For all the fuss of many trials costing an estimated $1 million, the results seem unfitting. I think the Supreme Court of Canada wasted a lot of resources, and the process took much longer than it actually had to. The case reveals the blurriness in hate speech and how it's such a gray area in law. I also think the court should have been harder on Keegstra with a sentence of 1 to 2 years in prison. I believe this because it sends a strong message to Canadians that not all forms of speech are acceptable, and if there is causing direct harm to a group. Also, Keegstra was teaching children, our future generation, things like the Holocaust does not exist. Ethically, that awful behavior should face a longer penalty. As the first case to get charged with the Canadian hate speech, it shows great importance to Canadians. It was the first stepping stone to protecting the rights of minority groups and started a lot of conversation for Canadians to think of what they say, because everyone has the right of opinions inside their head, but not necessarily to what they share with the public. James Keegstra shines a light of flaws in the court system. It fails to find someone guilty in a reasonable time, failure to provide